Hey there. Thanks for being with us once again on the podcast. Super excited. Today's guest, Mickie Kennedy, is a PR expert and a press release ninja. And we're going to be talking all about the power of public relations and how to capture media attention and really build credibility and build out everything that will drive traffic to both your website as well as to your business. It's a framework. It's a template. It's excellent advice. And we're getting it from an expert. So you're not going to want to miss this episode. Thanks so much to the sponsors this week. And also, check out the Restaurant Rockstars Academy. If you're starting a new restaurant or if you just want to run your existing restaurant more profitably and more successfully, it's everything you need to know in critical restaurant numbers and finances, inventory, cost controls, marketing, staff training, and leadership. It's all there, all in a very affordable monthly price. So check it out at restaurantrockstars.com. And now, on with the episode.
You're tuned in to the Restaurant Rockstars Podcast. Powerful ideas to rock your restaurant. Here's your host, Roger Bodwin.
Rockstars, there are many elements to consider when growing your restaurant. Are you connecting with diners enough and with the right message? Could your kitchen be putting out more orders than your dining areas have room for? Well, it can be overwhelming, especially when the reason you got into this business is for the food and the people. That's why restaurants get Pop Menu. Pop Menu is the marketing tech platform designed to make growing your restaurant easy, so you don't have to grow it alone. With Pop Menu, you can capture more guests and their preferences through your restaurant's website that's designed to easily collect contact information and data so you can see what your guests love and why they dine with you. Connect and build authentic relationships with guests by using modern technology that personalizes marketing. Make all your systems work better together, improve margins, and conquer the chaos of your restaurant's digital presence. Pop Menu has a special offer for my listeners. For a limited time, get $100 off your first month, plus lock in one unchanging monthly rate at popmenu.com/rockstars. Go now to get $100 off your first month at popmenu.com/rockstars. True hospitality and guest convenience are vital in your restaurant. I'm proud to say that for 23 years, my restaurants provided both with paging equipment by JTech. We used guest and server pagers, and my teams could not have delivered great dining experiences without them. JTech systems help you run a great restaurant. Now, JTech pagers are reliable, durable, easy to set up and operate. Guest pagers increase sales and give guests peace of mind knowing they'll be called when their table's ready. Staff pagers notify when orders are up, fresh, and ready, and save time by eliminating the need for servers to check on orders. JTech also offers Motorola two-way radio solutions, QR code virtual paging, reservations management, curbside notifications, and coming soon, Linkware, a wearable watch-like smartband that can receive messages and tasks from the JTech Linkware application. Now, I saw this product at a recent food show, and it's really cool. To learn more and get a special offer from JTech exclusively for my listeners, go to www.jtech.com/rockstars. That's spelled JTECH.com/rockstars. Hey there, welcome to the show. Mickie, how are you?
Oh, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to have you. Now, this is a really interesting episode because it's marketing related, and marketing is so important to restaurants and hospitality operations, but there's a spin on it, and you have a specific expertise in this. So we're going to get into all that. But first, I have to ask you, did you ever, work in a restaurant or ever have aspirations to be in the hospitality business?
I did. My career path after grad school was to be a server by day and write poetry by night. And after I got my MFA in creative writing with an emphasis in poetry, I did that for a summer. And I realized that it was a lot more physically taxing on my body. My knees hurt, my ankles hurt, and I was just psychologically zapped at the end of the day. So I decided at the end of the summer that I needed a different career path. So I applied for a safe office job and was hired at a telecom research startup as employee number 3. And all they saw was writing in my background, and they said, "Hey, figure out press releases for us because we think that PR would be really good for us." And I looked at the data that we were producing and found lots of little anomalies with interesting stories behind it. And I just presented those to the media through press releases, and we got lots of media attention: Financial Times, Economist, Washington Post, New York Times. And I found it rather easy. Now, we had the advantage of having a lot of data, but I that's what really hooked me and made me realize that PR could be so powerful. That, here was a small startup without a lot of marketing dollars, just putting together messages and really, killing it out there in the media, and it's just driving sales and buzz, and it was just really helping us.
I'm really glad you're bringing that up, because we're going to dive into the power of PR and what your particular expertise is. But several things come to mind. First, when I ran restaurants, I was sort of obsessed with getting media coverage for my business. And I didn't have a professional PR firm. That would have been really expensive. And a lot of these firms want you to work on retainer and all that kind of stuff. And I never even considered that. But I clearly saw the opportunity. So I want to dive more into that opportunity. But the poetry thing really sticks out. You're a writer, and your writing and your interest and passion for writing has really led to your career success, which is awesome. Did it all start with poetry, or did you write all types of things?
I did write lots of stuff growing up. I was always writing short stories, poetry, lots of stuff, but I really fell in love with poetry. I think that having ADHD, the ability to get in, draft something, and then get out and have a completed project worked for me. I don't think I, have the control to be able to sit down and develop a novel or something that's so long-term, because my mind is so, torn into little bits and abstractions and distractions as well.
What type of poetry do you like to write?
Mostly I write free verse narrative poetry, a lot of milestones that go through my life, challenges I had as a child, celebrations I had, growing up, moments with a grandparent or something like that.
Okay. And do you publish your works, or is it personal?
I do publish it. I took a break from building my business and started back in poetry about 5 or 6 years ago. And I probably published over 100 poems and lots of little journals since then, and have completed 2 books, but I'm trying to find a publisher. And that's a long process, because there's a lot more people writing poetry than reading poetry. So the publishers are really, looking at 1,500 books to select 1 or 2. And so it's very competitive.
It's fascinating, because I'm sort of a music fan. I like classic rock. And back in the late 60s and early 70s, there was a band called The Doors, and Jim Morrison was obviously the famous front man of that band. Very controversial, but very unique band. But it was all centered around Jim Morrison's poetry. He had these incredible lines of verse that he wrote, and he had endless journals filled with this poetry. And he became sort of partners in crime with the keyboard player that he went to film school with in Los Angeles. And as soon as this keyboard player heard these, they weren't lyrics yet. It was verse, but he's like, sing me that. And this was so unique and powerful. And it became the backbone of literally, their success. And they went to international stardom based on poetry. And now you're taking poetry and you're integrating your writing skills, and you're helping other businesses succeed. And it's amazing how your life can sort of shift based on a passion or an interest. And suddenly it becomes a career when maybe you never would have thought of it as a career. But it sounds like your first gig was, hey, write some press releases. You figured out that you had a real talent for this. What happened next? Did you stay in that gig for a while? Did you have several other writing sort of career opportunities before you started your own company? Tell us about that.
So I was faxing press releases at the time for this telecom startup. And all of a sudden, a lot of journalists would say, could you just email it to us? And that's when the light bulb went off and said, I could build this huge Rolodex of journalists. And so I mentioned it to my boss, and he goes, that could be a cool business idea. And so in my evenings and weekends, I would contact journalists and ask if I could add them to my Rolodex and send them press releases in their beat. And at the time, journalists were like, sure, we love, content. A lot of them were surprised it was free. Now it's the opposite, problem. A lot of journalists are just getting inundated with so much spam and off-target press releases and pitches. But it was a great period. I spent about a year until I had about 10,000 journalists in my database. And then I launched and went live. And that was, it'll be 25 years this October.
Wow.
And so
Awesome.
it's shifted and changed over the years. We were approached by PR Newswire at one point, more than 10 years ago, and asked, why don't we also send our releases through them? And I countered that my customers are paying, I think then $300. And I was like, your national press release distribution over the wire of like 600 words is like $1,200 to $1,500. My clients couldn't afford that. And I shared who my clients were: small businesses, startups, people who didn't have huge budgets. And they, said, well, we'd like to support them. Let's try to make the economies work between us. And they did. And they've been a really good partner, allowing small businesses to reach a national distribution over the wire without having to pay the $1,200 to $1,500.
Boy, that's a really unique competitive advantage. And I'm sure that my audience is hearing that because, costs are rising and, it's so important for a restaurant to reach and build awareness and get new customers and then build on the customers that they have, especially in a new restaurant. So, to increase awareness and really stand out from the competition, where does a small business or a restaurant or a hotel or a bed and breakfast inn or any hospitality enterprise, where should they start, or what should they start to think about, especially if they're new, in sort of, besides creating their concept, how do they get the word out, build awareness? You know what I mean?
Right.
What would you suggest?
I think the important thing is to realize that local media is very accessible. And, you can build your own Rolodex. If you think about it, in your community, there's probably less than a dozen people that would write about you or cover you. And I'm including TV and radio as well. And the thing is just to figure out who they are at your local newspaper, who covers local restaurants and local businesses. Is it the same person? If not, put two people in your Rolodex. Ask for their email address. You can call and just request it. They're members of the community. They're journalists. They are supposed to be accessible. And, I've never had a problem with people not giving out their contact information. No. I've had some who just say, hey, we prefer email, or we prefer, a phone pitch, but very few prefer phone pitches. But just find out how they like to be communicated with and get their information. If you're lucky enough to have a business magazine or business newspaper, find out who covers local restaurants there. Look at TV spots. Are there occasional spotlights on a news segment that highlights businesses? If so, find out who the producer or booker of that segment is on that newscast. Same thing with radio. And all of a sudden you have like a dozen or less people that you can reach out to. And, my whole business is press releases, but when it comes to this, you really don't even need to have a press release. What you really need to have is a pitch. And that's like a few sentences on why you would be a compelling story for the journalist. And do realize that journalists like to have a story arc. So you want to provide them with a lot of elements that would be, interesting and compelling to build out a story arc for you. If you're announcing a new restaurant, for example, what was your story? What was your journey? If you ever watch Shark Tank, that most people lead with their journey, their story, the obstacle they overcame, or something inspirational, or, something very vulnerable. So, share your story and share your path and how something came to be, because that's the elements for a journalist to build a story. Don't discount a quote. I always recommend, if you're doing a pitch, go ahead and write a really compelling quote that they could contextually put in your story. If you have an amazing quote, a journalist can build a whole article or story around it.
I love that.
So, really, spend some time, quality time. If you are creative, that's the place to be really creative. You want to make it so that you're saying something that can't easily be paraphrased by the journalist. If they were to paraphrase it, there'd be a loss of the magic or how powerful you said something, or the authority that you have. And I really believe that, local pitching is the secret sauce. If you read your papers and local magazines and things like that, you will often see the same companies appear again and again. And it's because they've established a relationship with these journalists. They reach out to them maybe, 3 to 6 times a year and pitch a story. And when a journalist says, not a good fit for right now, because they've seen you again and again, when they're working on a story that they can plug you in, often they'll reach out to you. And that's why we see the same companies again and again in local news. It's not that they have, a best friend at the newspaper, or, a lot of money that they're pouring into the newspaper, but often it's because, they've worked that the networking, the friend angle, being a good, relationship, using tactics like, hey, I really like this article that you did, or hey, that article you did was amazing, here's something else that a tidbit or something that a little bit of expertise. You may not get mentioned in a follow-up article, but they're going to remember that you were helpful, or you said something really kind, and it wasn't generic, it was pretty specific. So I call that putting money in the bank, and so that when you do have a pitch, they're more likely to you can cash it in, and they're more likely to go ahead and develop a story based on you. And I think that that's the biggest part that busy restaurateurs just it gets lost. They don't cultivate those relationships. But really, we're talking about less than half an hour, 4 times a year, once a quarter. It's very attainable for most people. And, the types of things that a restaurant could talk about, is, a grand opening, rebranding, or renovation, just introducing a new team. Like maybe you have a new chef, or you just want to highlight a partnership, or, like say you have a celebrity coming in to film a TV show. All of those things are elements for, developing things like that. But there's also other things that, could possibly have a news angle, menu changes, especially if you have like a completely different angle, like maybe you're being more sustainable with the types of meats and fish that you're providing, and what the story is behind that. Maybe you're sourcing some stuff local. People love things like that, human interest, relationship with a local farm or a local business. And journalists are willing to, share those stories. Just make sure that you put the elements in there for them to build it out as a story format. Ideally, in cases like that, I would say get some quotes as well from the person that you're partnering with, and really, try to make it a win-win between the two of you, because that makes it a lot more compelling from a journalist standpoint.
That was a wealth of information and sort of a crash course in several things come to mind. We talked about the importance of having a story. I believe every restaurant or any small business has their unique story. The reason for being, what was the inspiration or the vision for this? It's like, is it built around grandma's recipes? Is it some new concept that's unique in the neighborhood or in the area? So there's a story, of course. And I see, I've worked with quite a few restaurants over the decades and whatnot, and I see a lot of these really unique, you called them tidbits, whether you call them tidbits, I used to call them hooks or nuggets. It's like all these unique things that these businesses or restaurants were not using in their marketing, even though I thought they were really unique and compelling, and that it's public interest stuff. It's like guests are interested. Train your staff on what these things are and promote and talk, icebreakers at the table, because half the time guests are first-time visitors. They don't know those things. And then the last thing you said was the quote. If you can come up with a really compelling quote that is the ethos of your restaurant or business that, captures the imagination, I think that's going to pave the way for journalism. So thank you so much for sharing those 3 things. And that foundational framework is a really great starting point. Let me ask you another question. Somehow this popped into my mind. Now, not every city or community, other than media outlets in every area, which certainly exists, certain larger areas have sort of food critics, right? Would you ever suggest that someone reach out to a food critic to critique or come in and rate your business or your restaurant? And if so, that's kind of a hook. But then you've got to be prepared where every single night you don't know when this person's going to come in, and you absolutely have to dazzle every guest, because when that person comes in, they have to have a stellar experience hitting the food, the service, the ambiance, so that they can write a glowing article that's really positive press versus it could backfire on you too. Have you ever suggested someone do that, or have you seen anyone do that successfully?
I've seen several people make invitations out to critics, and I find that a lot of times those invitations are not followed by the critic.
Okay.
I think that what happens is, a better solution is to create some organic buzz, perhaps
Yes.
using PR, perhaps, just people talking in the community. And that will drive a critic to say, I've heard some stuff. I need to check this place out. I think that works better. It's more organic. And if you put someone on notice that, hey, we'd love you to come out, it makes them more likely to be, distrustful of the experience. Like, they kind of knew I was coming over the next few weeks, probably because they invited me.
Sure.
So I think that just being more organic, using natural buzz will get the critics in there.
Now, not everyone listening is a marketing guru or expert as you are, but there is a term that we use in marketing, and it's the unique selling proposition. Can you define that for our audience? And then we'll dive a little deeper into what that means.
Right. So USP, unique selling proposition, is what is it that your business does that's unique to you? You don't have to be unique to, all restaurants in the world, but locally, what is it about your restaurant that differentiates it from all other restaurants? And, there's lots of different approaches, but the best ones are ones that you can sort of defend. And, they say build a moat around it. With Coca-Cola, it's their recipe and the generational experience of the product. And, that's something that they defend and don't usually tinker with the exceptions of New Coke. But, what is it that you have? Is it, your grandmother's recipes and elements of that? Or is it that you have an amazing staff and chef and things like that? Is it, the decor, the architecture of the restaurant? Is, what are the things that you want to highlight as what you feel is unique? It could be your offering or the experience of how you serve the food. Is it maybe family style or things like that? And I think that anything that you can build and articulate very in a very short way, we call them elevator pitches, is going to do really well. So you want to be able to say in a sentence or two what it is that your restaurant does that sort of separates it from everyone else in your local market.
Okay, that's great advice. Let's follow that up with, you worked with a lot of small businesses, restaurants included. And have you seen, or would you recommend? Well, let me back up a second. When I was in this business running and owning restaurants, even though I was a marketing guy, I went to business school, I had my own ideas of what marketing was and brand building. I was obsessed with building a brand. But my competitive advantage was really, reaching out to my team members, my employees constantly and asking them for their input on the business, how we ran it. Do you see a better way of doing things? Do you have a new crazy marketing idea? We encouraged people to come up with ideas because a lot of times business owners are really close to their business and they don't necessarily have a fresh perspective. And everyone thinks, oh, I got this and I own the place, so I should come up with that. But I'm saying, is it a good idea to just ask other people what they think that are close to your business also? And you may come up with a list of things you never even thought of that might go into your unique sales proposition. Do you think so?
Yes, I agree completely. One of the things that I've noticed is whenever we hire a new employee, at times they say, why do we do things this way? Wouldn't this be easier? And I say,
yes,
yes, I encourage this. We have been doing it this way because we've always been doing it this way, but it may not be the most efficient. It may not be the best way. And I think that those kinds of moments are valuable because they're outside looking in and challenging certain assumptions and making suggestions and possible changes that can really help sort of streamline the business or, identify things that would make you more, authentic or unique.
Okay, that's Okay, that's great. I guess we're on the same page with that, and it certainly makes sense. So thank you for your validation there. I'm just a huge believer in involving your people and giving them a voice because it makes them feel like their opinions or ideas matter as opposed to you're just an employee, go do that job. It's like you're part of a team. So I think that's terrific. Let's talk a lot about press releases because we can cover a lot of ground with a press release. Let me go back to your idea for the quote. Is the quote ever the headline of the press release? Because you need that really hard-hitting top line headline that grabs the media person's attention that then compels them to read the press release. Or am I missing something? Let's talk about what you should do to obviously start crafting a press release. And is there a template or a format, number of words? I mean, this is your expertise. So take us through press releases.
Okay. So generally a quote isn't used in the headline, but you really want the headline to be very succinct and really come across to what is the important pitch or hook in that press release.
Yes.
And you want to make sure that you put that front and center in the opening paragraph as well. But you really are just, broadcasting that from the headline. Remember, you're writing a headline for the journalist. You're not writing for the end users or consumers. And so busy journalists are looking at press releases and stories, and you want to make sure that it's easily identifiable, that it's their beat, and it could potentially be something that would be of interest to them, and they'll click through and read more. There's usually anywhere from 4 to 7 paragraphs in a press release. The first paragraph, identifying the hook, adding a little bit more content. There's usually the inverted pyramid of the most important information first. And then as you go further in the press release, you get to the less important information. Usually at the end, there's like a boilerplate, which is a recycled paragraph where it's like about restaurant or about the company. And those are usually just the elevator pitch of what your company is. It's usually 3 to 5 sentences. And that gets recycled in all of your media that goes out. It's just a good way of identifying who you are contextually. The additional paragraphs in the press release between the boilerplate and the opening paragraph are really just providing additional information. If you can get the quote in the second paragraph, I think that's really good, but especially if it's like a really nicely curated quote that you've come up with. But it doesn't have to be, but I do find that quotes are so powerful. I do like to get them in there, at least in the second paragraph. And you just want to support it and provide enough information for a journalist to be able to develop and build out a story. That's it. Everything's usually written in the third person. The quote is the big exception where you might write in the first person talking about yourself within the company. And it's really not elevated writing. You're really writing at a low level. And I do challenge a lot of people who feel like maybe I'm not the right person to write the press release about my company. And I think that a lot of people would be surprised that they can come up with a really good press release on their own. If you want, you can go to eReleases.com and just look at our press release samples. We have one for the restaurant industry, and that might be a good way to, look at how someone else has done it. And I think that'll make you a lot more comfortable feeling like you can develop your own press release. But that being said, we offer writing services for those who just feel they can't do it. But I also think that another solution that you might want to consider is using AI. I've played around with AI before. It's terrible to go to AI and say, write me a press release about my restaurant. It won't come up with something good. But if you have the hook and you know what you want it to write about, you can get it to write you like say, hey, this is my press release is about XYZ. Give me 10 headline suggestions. And you can, take the best one and modify it. Now I'm opening the press release. Here's some more additional information, write the opening paragraph. And I find that if you take it paragraph by paragraph, knowing what you want to accomplish in each piece, you can get it to really write a well-written press release. And I think for people who aren't comfortable with their writing, it's a great way, to use it. A lot of people would say, hey, AI content, I don't want it on my website, which I agree with. I wouldn't put blog posts up that were written by AI personally. But when it comes to a press release, it's just for a journalist, and the journalist is going to turn it into an article. They're going to write it. And so I don't think there's any problems with using AI. Read everything, because sometimes AI can be really loose with the facts.
Yes.
But I think any tool that you can use that'll empower you to move forward with press releases can really be helpful.
That's excellent advice. Let me ask you, is there any place for humor or irreverence or maybe controversy or any of these things to sort of cut through the clutter of everyone else following that same format? What's your best advice there?
Great. So when it comes to humor, I find local media to be the most accepting of humorous stories. So again, when you're doing your pitching, if you're doing something fun and quirky, go for it. Maybe it's, how you're celebrating Valentine's Day. All the servers are going to be dressed like Cupids or something. Whatever it is,
that's a hook.
Have some supporting photos. Images go a long way with the media. That can really, make you stand out if they're looking at two stories that are just sort of like mid-grade newsworthiness, but one has a really compelling photo or two that you've attached, you're more likely to get picked up. I think that, humor does have a place. I think that it's one of the least used and often used improperly. I see a lot of national press releases that try to use April Fools and other kinds of like gag type stuff. And I find that works better in the local market. So I think that that's perfect for restaurants and things like that. You don't want to always pitch with that angle, but I think that a healthy mix that includes that is quite fine. And I think that, at the end of the day, is it a human interest story? Is it something that, people would find interesting or fascinating? Journalists are gatekeepers, and they're trying to decide what information is worth their audience's time and energy. What is worth sharing with them? So anything you can build out and sort of develop is going to have a much better success.
Listen, when I ran restaurants, I had my core values, the things most important to how I ran my restaurants: monitoring daily operations, training my team for consistently great guest experiences, food safety, quality assurance, and preventative maintenance. All this took a system. Well, here's what Xenia can do. Xenia gives you a modern app, really an operational base camp that scales standard operating procedures, trains your team, controls operations, and even manages food safety. Now, I really like their sensors that continuously monitor temperature for fridges and freezers so you can proactively prevent inventory losses. Now, how valuable is that? Now, whether managing a single or multiple locations, the Xenia app helps you ensure consistency, compliance, and accountability across your operation. You can see full detail in real time from anywhere in your Xenia dashboard with automated reports right to your inbox. Now, again, this was vital in my restaurants. Xenia is offering my listeners white glove service with free onboarding and implementation so you can jump straight into immediate usage and value. Xenia starts at just $69 per month per location. So get my special deal at www.xenia.team/rockstars. Xenia is spelled Xenia. Now, here's a crazy thought. Speaking of gatekeeping, what's the best delivery method once you've come up with your ideal press release? If everybody is emailing this media person and the email inboxes, all of our inboxes are inundated, does snail mail ever get their attention? Like a handwritten letter that literally includes the press release that's professionally done, of course, but addressed to that exact person in care of such a such media outlet? I mean, what's the best delivery method?
So it really depends. I know that with the pandemic, a lot of people are working from home. So I don't know how often they get their office mail. That might be, something that's a little difficult. Yep. But, also, get a feel for where they are. There are a lot of journalists on Twitter, and I have had some journalists say, you can send me an email, but, contact me on Twitter, DM me. That's a better place that I actually surveil. So when you initially start building your Rolodex, ask them for their email address, ask them, is that the most efficient way to reach you? And they'll sort of tell you what other ways they're open to. But I think that email is a really natural way. I would be wary of phone calls and follow-ups. Mm-hmm. That's something that a lot of PR people do. They heavily pitch and then they heavily follow up, and journalists see it as harassment. Yeah. And so I wouldn't ever want to get that reputation with local media, especially because they can be really such great allies. And I think that just reaching out there, sending them the press release, sending them a pitch, because it doesn't always have to be a press release with local media. Just a few sentences and a great quote can accomplish the same thing as a press release with local media in particular.
If you're an owner, say, of a restaurant or small business, and you've got sort of a dynamic personality, do you ever encourage people to create a short video that is your pitch? Like you mentioned the elevator pitch. Would that ever work to email them the video, like standing in front of your business or taking them on a quick tour and like giving them the dialogue and giving them a quote? Just came to mind. I don't know. What do you think?
Right. I think that it certainly could with TV. I think that seeing visually your impromptu pitch might give them ideas for saying, yes, we could go in there and get some B-roll and some other footage, and this would be a really great place. So I think that could really work really well, especially for TV. It could also work for local news as well, because they like to use photos and stuff, and maybe it could inspire them to say, this would be some great shots that we could get for an article that we do about them.
How important is credibility of a business, especially if they're a brand new business? And let's just say they're opening next week, first time, grand opening, blah, blah, blah. You literally have no credibility, yet that is important. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that anytime you do get media pickup, it does give you credibility. It's like third-party corroboration or social proof when a journalist, deems you worthy of writing an article. Yep. It almost acts as an implied endorsement. And so I think that's why, local businesses should consider PR and working with the local media, because it is something that most people are not doing. Most people are not reaching out to local media, and it is a great opportunity for you. Journalists are expected to do more with less, and they are busy. So anytime they get relevant, interesting stories, it helps them, and it's an easy way for you to spoon feed them a possible story that could come out. And like I said, it doesn't always work. So you may reach out to your Rolodex of a dozen people, 3 to 4 times a year, and maybe 2 or 3 stories develop over that year. You will find that the more stories that you get, the easier it gets over time, the more comfortable you are, and probably more attentive to the types of things that they're, will respond to. And so that you can craft more messages that hit going forward.
Okay. Thank you for answering that. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about websites, because obviously it's very important for a restaurant to have an online presence. And, there are great restaurant websites that really, I've always believed a great restaurant website literally gives you the whole feel of the place and what your experience is going to be like before you even get anywhere near the place and walk in the door, and it can be compelling to get somebody in the door. But how do we build website traffic so that we can get them to the website to convince them then to come into the restaurant? I mean, that's a whole marketing angle unto itself.
Right. So there's lots of ways in which to sort of get some search engine traffic. A lot of it is like, what are the getting an article written about you and linking to you is great, but a lot of articles don't include links to somebody. So you almost have to have something pretty compelling on your website for people to link to you. One of the things that I see like in local markets that work really well is like maybe a survey or something of the community that you've done that sort of showcases, you hope, your business in that trend. And that's a way to stand out. And usually I recommend that you build a page on the website where you collect all the data from the survey, but your pitch is only going to focus on maybe a couple aspects of it. But all that information is there for people. Maybe it's a way for people to, vote on their favorite Italian restaurant in your community, and you're an Italian restaurant. People will then link to you to say, hey, go here and vote for your favorite local restaurant, or your favorite server, or your favorite, holiday, or things along those lines. If you make it sort of playful and interesting and interactive, you stand the likelihood that local media will link to it or bring it to people's attention, and that could really drive traffic and links to you.
That triggers another thought. Testimonials. Where do you lie on testimonials? Because every restaurant or even small business has its raving fans that just love the place. It's like, I go there because, and not everyone is a great writer, but if you encourage testimonials, and if you ask that person's permission to either use a quote or, can I take your words and paraphrase a little bit along those lines? I mean, that can be really powerful for credibility, can it? I mean, would you recommend that they use that even in a press release? If you've got a raging fan that's been coming to your place for 10 years and, oh my God, this place has the absolute best Mexican food and margaritas, and whatever the quote says, you can elicit quotes from your best customers, not just try to come up with one, I would think. Right? Yeah,
I think that testimonials work really well. And if you can get photos of them in your restaurant, even better. I think that all of those things can really add legitimacy to you, helps you sort of stand out and share other people's experiences, because, a lot of people like to look at restaurants. One of the things they do is they look at the reviews. And sometimes reviews are not kind. It seems like a lot of people who leave reviews are the ones who've had bad experiences. And a lot of people that had good experiences have to be prompted a little bit to leave a review. So,
right.
making sure that your interactions with the customer maybe highlights, hey, if you had a really great experience, we'd love it if you went here and left us a review. And I think that that's a way to sort of cultivate some more reviews and make it more even with the good and the occasional bad experience that someone has.
That's excellent advice. Thank you for sharing that, because so few operations really think about it or even dedicate the time to their online presence, especially through media reviews. Like back in the day before there was an internet, word of mouth was your best form of advertising. It's like if you had raving fans that talked to their friends and talked to their family, you got to go here. It's like that would be free, marketing for your business. And then now with the internet, it's like anybody can go to Yelp or TripAdvisor or Google reviews or whatever it is. And the slightest little disappointment in a restaurant, as opposed to bringing it to your attention when you're there and you have the opportunity to fix it, some people will just go right there and they'll, they got a bad taste in their mouth. They're going to slam you. And it's almost like a damage control thing where you have to go and monitor your constant reviews and just stay on top of it and somehow make it right and show that you are taking responsibility for something, if in fact it happened, and making it right for the guest. And that sort of takes the sting out of a negative review. But what you said about encouraging positive reviews, I'd even print that in the menus. It's like I would ask every customer, or even have the host say on the way out, if you had a great time, please leave us a review. We'd certainly appreciate it. And that goes a long way. I think that was really, really well put out advice. So thanks for that. Let's talk about eReleases now. You've got this company called eReleases, and you work with clients, and you've got the expertise, and you're a writer and a creative person. First of all, does poetry ever find its way into your press releases?
Not really, but I do think that having a poetic mind helps me when it comes to being a little more creative and coming up with strategic types of press releases. So many people, when it comes to press releases, do what I feel like are the press releases that don't matter much. They're written from the standpoint of, we want to promote us, so here's something that puts us forward facing the best, or, sells our product the best. But what they fail to identify is, does anything in the press release solve the journalist problem of building a story? Yes. And I think that if you sort of reverse engineer your press release with the journalist in mind, I think you have a much higher likelihood of getting sort of media pickup. it is unfortunate that a lot of the press releases that we see are like personnel changes, and it's not like a major one where you brought in a new head chef or something like that. It's like, a new hostess or something along those lines.
Sure.
And I think a lot of those are done just because they look nice to the new staff and the new employees, but they're really not strategic enough to get much media attention, if at all, outside of maybe a local on the move section in a newspaper or something. I think that, when you are sending out a press release through a paid service like eReleases, you want to be a bit more strategic with what you're doing and, really sort of highlight something that's a little bit more unique or strategic. And I think that, like owning your own story, focusing on your unique selling proposition is one of those things that works really well. Pulling in data, whether it's your data that you've mined through a survey or just public data, using that to anchor your story can really go a long ways, where you can say like, hey, 84% of restaurants have, are doing this. And a new trend that's, coming in is like, paying at the table. And this is what we're doing at our table. Because your card never leaves your site, the risk of your data being used or misused is almost gone. Things like that could be a really, special, local interest story. And, your business could stand out because you may not be the first to have done it. You may not be, the biggest restaurant that is using something like that at the table, but you're the one who brought it to the media's attention locally and pitched it as an idea and talked about how your business is utilizing it and welcoming the media to come in and maybe get some pictures or some additional collateral or ask you for quotes or, use a quote that you've already provided.
That's an excellent idea too. Thanks for that. Is there, in your press releases, do you find that there's a sweet spot in terms of number of words? You've sort of laid out the framework, and we talked about the paragraphs and the importance of, what comes first and second, and then how you end it. But is it, it should always be one page. It shouldn't go to 2 pages, I'm assuming. But, how many words is like a perfect press release, if there is such a thing? Or does it even matter as long as it's a one-pager?
Right. I think that staying under one page is the real goal. I think between 400 and 600 words is adequate for most press releases that are out there. I've seen press releases that are 1,000 words, and they need it to be. Generally, they're publicly traded companies, and they have a lot of disclosures that they just have to include.
Right.
But I think that the average press release is safe at 400 to 600 words. Don't feel that you have to build it out to 600 words if you feel like you've covered everything in the 400 words. But you want to make sure that you have included enough information that a journalist can build out a story. So having a little bit of history of the restaurant is always useful if you're looking for additional information further down the press release that you could include. You could also sort of highlight other milestones that the business has had over the years. That could be really useful to sort of contextualize that you're a member of the community and you've done lots of really cool and interesting things in the past.
For the audience that's interested in your services at eReleases, can you tell us how you work with a new client and typically what that process looks like? How you understand their business and their message and how you work with them and how much of the heavy lifting you do versus, you guide them and you tell them what to do. Like, what's the process like? And I'm sure maybe it varies with different clients, but take us through that.
Right. So we are all about helping people who've never done PR before. So don't feel that you have to come to us knowing exactly how this works. We're good at holding your hand and walking you through the process. The only people you'll interact with on the phone or email are editors. We don't have any salespeople. They just always got in the way. So, there's no quotas or commissions or anything like that. We're pretty honest that if you come to us with an idea of letting you know what we feel the success of something like that would be. If you have written a press release and you want us to look at it, we're willing to do that. Give us a couple of business days to get back to you. But that was completely free, whether you use us or not. We're just We're just accessible, and we're all about accessibility and education. I have a free masterclass for my customers that your audience may want to partake in. And that's at eReleases.com/plan, PLAN. And it's an hour-long video masterclass that goes through strategic types of press releases, the ones that are more meaningful and more likely to get PR attention. I think that's a really great place for someone to start if they're open to PR and considering it.
Yeah.
Going at it from that standpoint will make sure that you're building out stories that are more likely to work going forward. We do offer a writing service, but I do challenge people to try to write it on your own, have us review it. We might be able to beef it up a little bit at no charge. But I understand if it's just not your forte or you prefer, wanting to hand it off, we are available. But I do think that it's not it's not a secret recipe or spell that you cast through a press release. And I do think that most people are capable of putting one together.
Yeah, we talked earlier about the high cost of traditional PR agencies, of course, and possibly the retainers that only the biggest restaurant groups can possibly afford. And sure, that's a great route for the right business, but a single independent location, obviously, your services are much more aligned with that. Is there a typical framework for an effective campaign? And do you have sort of an a la carte price list? Because you're so much more affordable. Do you want to share what, typical costs might be for different scenarios?
Right. So we have a new customer special where people come in, and I think it's $350 for the average press release to be distributed. You can buy a package at that. And if you decide to come back within 60 days of your first release, you can get back into that package pricing. So, you could build out a package of, 4 or 5 releases for well under $1,200 to $1,400 and use those over a year's time. We do have other packages as well that are a bit larger, but I think that's a really good place to start. I think that most people aren't going to be pushed away at those prices. I think that's affordable for most people, especially when you consider that one release nationally over the wire of 600 words is like, $1,200 to $1,500. So, you can do 4 releases for the price of one. So that makes it really compelling and useful, I think, to get out there. But I think that at the end of the day, it's really about realizing that you are just as important as everybody else that's out there getting media attention. So many people feel like we're too small, or we're not relevant enough, or we're not newsworthy enough. And what you have to realize is that the media really loves spotlighting smaller businesses, the unknown companies, the unknown restaurants, the unknown businesses. And the reason for that is everybody knows the large, well-funded business that advertises everywhere. The journalist doesn't get accolades for, writing articles about them. It's the little people that we didn't know about that you brought to attention. So it gives the journalist more of, seen as a curator and bringing these small little discoveries and delights to other people. And I think that that's where being small and new, or, just sort of deciding to pull the trigger on PR can really, go very well for you. Excellent.
What about a restaurant group, perhaps, or a restaurant company that wants to gain more national attention? I think earlier in the episode, you said that you had a huge database of like 10,000 journalists. If you don't have perhaps, some of the biggest, obviously, media publications would be Nation's Restaurant News, which is probably the biggest. Then there's Restaurant Owner, and there's all these different media publications that specialize in our industry. If you don't necessarily have that in your database, but some of my audience reach out to you and say, hey, I want you to do soup to nuts. Let's come up with a campaign. Let's write the press releases. Do you actually do the legwork and the research of finding out who these media outlets are and who the key decision maker might be? And can you get somebody national attention if that's their goal?
Right. Yes, we specialize in national attention. That's what we do. We do offer local saturation as well, but we are known for the national distribution over the wire. And if you look at where does it go on our website, if you look in food and restaurants, you'll see that everybody that's in the business is included there.
Awesome.
There's very few little gaps and things that are missing, but we really want to make sure that when your release goes out, that it's available to the widest audience and the most appropriate audience.
That is terrific. Well, you've given us so much information and such a framework and so much valuable advice on what to do. And it's so important, for small businesses, for any really restaurants of any size, to go out and get that media attention. I'd make it a priority. And if they can do it themselves, great. And if not, I'm obviously going to share how they can contact you in our show notes and through this episode. But thank you so much. Did we miss anything? Because we covered some ground today.
I don't think so. I think that most everything was touched on. There's a lot of resources on eReleases.com for press release samples and templates and how to write a press release and guides and things like that. So I would just recommend anybody, who's open to exploring it to go there. Also check out that masterclass as well.
Excellent resources. And it's so wonderful that you provide that as a free tool, no obligation, of course. It's a wealth of information and expertise, and you've certainly specialized in this for so many years. So thanks for being on the podcast and being a great guest and sharing all that information.
Oh, thank you.
All right, Mickie, you were just terrific. So thanks for being here.
Sure.
Thank you so much. That was the Restaurant Rockstars podcast. Thanks to our audience. Thanks to our sponsors. And we can't wait to see you in the next episode. Stay well and stay tuned. Wow, Mickie, that was a fantastic episode. You really got our marketing and, more specifically, our public relations and press release juices flowing. You provided so much valuable advice that a restaurant owner or operator can either do themselves, or you've given them lots of resources at eReleases.com that'll help them get their business on the map. So thanks for sharing. Thanks again to our sponsors, Xenia, Pop Menu, JTech, and the Restaurant Rockstars Academy. Thanks to our audience for tuning in. Stay well and stay tuned. We'll see you next time. People go to restaurants for lots of reasons. For fun, celebration, for family, for lifestyle. What the customer doesn't know is the thousands of details it takes to run a great restaurant. This is a high-risk, high-fail business. It's hard to find great staff. Costs are rising and profits are disappearing. It's a treacherous road, and smart operators need a professional guide. I'm Roger. I've started many highly successful, high-profit restaurants that I've now sold for millions of dollars. I'm passionate about helping other owners and managers not just succeed, but knock it out of the park. I created a game-changing system, and it's filled with everything I've learned in over 20 years running super profitable, super fun restaurants. Everything from creating high-profit menu items and cost controls to staff training where your teams serve and sell, to marketing hooks, money-maximizing tips, and efficiencies across your operation. What does this mean to you? More money to invest in your restaurant, to hire a management team, time freedom, and peace of mind. You don't just want to run a restaurant. You want to dominate your competition and create a lasting legacy. Join the Academy, and I'll show you how it's done.
Thanks for listening to the Restaurant Rockstars Podcast. For lots of great resources, head over to restaurantrockstars.com. See you next time.